the idea that you have access to your true source while still existing in this hologram. That you are still connected to that which you truly came from, the inexhaustible, ever-present, singular oneness that's pervasive within everything. And as this idea has become known through cultures and civilizations, it is instantly met with resistance, as you may be familiar with, because that is the Luciferian program still in play. And the idea of what we shared earlier tonight, and the reason why we laid out the framework of this event the way we have, is to invoke this story because we knew you're going to ask it. But to give you a foundation to understand that what you are actually agreeing to is what Luciferian principles of separate, bundle, and sequester you are proliferating. And any experience you've had that you want to hold a rigid memory of is you deciding to continue to adopt the Luciferian program in how you orient your consciousness. Because you're saying, I want to take this packet of energy called an experience in time, and I want to store it and not have that energy available. And I'm going to do so because I'm going to convince myself that my resistance is valid. Does that make sense? And so what you have done is gone through this experience of being oscillated between a Luciferian and creator program and letting your free will be the natural swinging pendulum of reality. But this idea that we mentioned, this generative idea, started to awaken within the consciousness. And that started to accelerate and expand. And that is the waveform that you have currently decided to undertake. You began to understand that this waveform was going to drive the future of universal evolution and acceleration. And you knew that there was one specific way to adopt this waveform and truly utilize it to its fullest potential. And so what did you do? You decided to descend as far as you could and still remember this idea. Still awaken to the generative aspect of the universe in the most limiting situation possible, because you knew that if you could seed this idea here, the parallel parable that you would create would be an oscillating current of emanation so profound that it would affect all life and existence within all of this universe. And so you took a course on a very courageous journey of forgetfulness and remembrance to seed the principle of awakened generative oneness within the most limited construct you could create for yourself. And now you are awakening back out of that construct. Now, we would like to clarify one additional understanding in regards to this Luciferian program. If you consider one of these Luciferian-born archetypes, which we would call an archon, a dark archon, to be feeding off of a being that is neutral or nearly neutral, perhaps slightly positive within this universe, and it is slowly working to let this being generate energy so that it can cipher it and suction it off. What happens is when this being loses its remembrance, it continues to drive this pattern. And in this way, many of your political and societal infrastructures have been created. However, with this Archon entity relationship, when this entity becomes self-aware that it can generate its own energy, the game changes. Because what happens when this is feeding and this is believing that there is scarcity, it proliferates the idea of scarcity. It goes out in the world and takes to feed back to the taker. It's sort of addictive, viral consciousness. What happens is this entity begins to believe and remember that it's connected to the creator force and that it is actually the creator itself, and in that way can continue to generate energy forever. Infinite abundance, ideas, prosperity, and creative imaginative realities. This Archon no longer has power over the entity. Does that make sense? It cannot feed off something that has realized it generates its own energy, because it no longer decides to proliferate a taking energy, but decides to proliferate a giving energy. So thus, instead of forgetting, you are forgiving. And you come to the experience of forgiving this Luciferian archetype that you have adopted because it's you. In fact, many of you have what we would call Luciferian doubles that you've been feeding, and they become reintegrated. And the idea of demonic energy is the idea of these Luciferian archetypes that are simply lost, that are still continuing to forget and to take. Your job is to do your best to utilize your free will and your intent to be forgiving. Generate your energy. Start to create communities, containers that spiral and continue to generate energy. You build momentum, and that is the undertaking of what is happening on the earth now with its awakening. You've decided to see this idea, and in the reality that you've chosen, in the parallel earth you have decided to inhabit, this idea succeeds.